There's a very specific feeling you get when you've lived on a ranch for 20 years, a sixth sense that develops when the silence of the high desert is broken by something that doesn't belong. And I knew. I just knew something was dead wrong the second I watched two men in tactical vests pry open my gate at 2 in the morning. One of them was filming my garage with a high-end camera while the other was measuring the width of my driveway like he was planning a military invasion. And as I sat there in the dark of my office, watching the playback on my monitor with a cold cup of coffee in my hand, the only thought racing through my mind was, you boys just picked the wrong rancher. 10 days later, those same men were face down in the gravel with handcuffs on. But to understand how we got to that point, you have to understand the layout of the land. My property, Thorn Ridge, sits on a steep incline overlooking the valley, a rugged patch of earth that I bought to get away from the noise. But directly below me, creeping up the hillside like a slow-moving fungus, is the Whispering Pines Community Association, a soulless grid of cookie-cutter houses where the grass is measured with rulers and the residents hyperventilate if your mailbox is the wrong shade of beige. It started on a Tuesday, a crisp morning where the sun was just bleeding over the mountains, and I walked out to the front porch with Buster, my old blue heeler, to take in the air, but almost immediately, I saw them, tire tracks, fresh, deep, and aggressive, cutting across the loose gravel of my private road. Now, I know the tread marks of every vehicle that belongs up here. I know Otis's hay truck, I know the UPS van, I know my own beat-up Silverado. But these were different, wide mud-terrain tires on a vehicle that clearly never saw actual mud, clean lines, no wobble. The mark of a pavement princess SUV that had driven up to my gate, paused, and turned around. I crouched down, touching the disturbed earth, feeling that twist in my gut that old law enforcement guys get. I used to wear a badge back in the day, and retirement doesn't turn off the instinct. It just gives you more time to obsess over it. And I realized this wasn't someone getting lost, because the GPS cuts out 2 miles back. No, this was a probe, a test of my perimeter. I went back inside and pulled the footage from the trail cam I'd hidden in the scrub oak, and there it was, a white Land Rover rolling slowly up Thorn Ridge Road, with Whispering Pines Safety Patrol stenciled on the door in a font that tried way too hard to look like a police cruiser. They weren't cops, they weren't county, they were rent-a-cops hired by a board of directors, creeping onto a private road that wasn't in their jurisdiction, and as I watched them pause and look at my house, I didn't get hot-headed, I didn't scream, I just leaned back in my chair and whispered, so that's how we're playing it. The thing about bullies is that they always escalate if you don't check them immediately, and sure enough, 2 nights later, my phone buzzed on the nightstand with a motion alert from Gatecam 1. It was just after midnight, the witching hour for bad decisions, and when I opened the app, the screen glowed with the image of that same white Land Rover sitting inches from my keypad. 2 guys stepped out. Let's call them Meathead and the Scribe, looking like they were dressed for a SWAT raid, but moving with the awkward confidence of people who have never been punched in the face. The Scribe walked up to my keypad, and this is the part that made my blood run cold. He didn't smash it, he didn't hotwire it, he punched in a 4-digit code, my code, and the gate swung open effortlessly. Son of a bitch. I muttered, realizing that someone, maybe a delivery driver or a contractor, had sold me out, because watching a stranger breeze through your security measures feels less like a trespass and more like a violation of your soul. They drove in, parked halfway up the drive, and spent 15 minutes measuring the gradient of the slope and taking photos of my barn, muttering things the microphone barely picked up, words like non-compliant and runoff violation, which is HOA speak for, we want to control this. I didn't confront them that night, because an old cop knows you never interrupt your enemy when they're making a mistake. You let them build the case for you. Instead, I saved every frame of video, every audio file, and at first light, I was driving down to the station to see Sheriff Brody, a man I'd served with for a decade, a man who looked like he carried the weight of the county on his shoulders, but still had a spine made of iron. I walked into his office, tossed a USB drive on his desk, and said, "Press play, Brody. You're not gonna believe the audacity." He watched the footage in silence, his jaw tightening as he saw the Whispering Pines logo, and when it finished, he rubbed his temples and sighed. "That's private property, Elias. They have zero authority up there. And how the hell did they get your code?" "That's the question," I said. "But I'm not here for a sympathy chat. I'm filing a report. And I want it on record that this isn't a neighborly dispute. This is organized trespassing. Brody nodded, looking tired. I'll make a call to their president, a woman named Linda Sterling. She's intense, supposedly runs that HOA like it's a sovereign nation. But Elias, watch yourself, these people get obsessed. I drove home feeling a temporary sense of calm. But deep down I knew a phone call from the sheriff wouldn't stop someone like Linda Sterling. Because people who crave power over others view laws as suggestions and boundaries as insults. Sure enough, that afternoon, I found a thick, cream-colored envelope zip-tied to my gate, looking like a wedding invitation from hell. I opened it with my pocket knife, unfolded the heavy cardstock, and read the letter from the Whispering Pines Community Safety Committee, which stated in absolute gibberish legalese that due to proximity and safety concerns, Thorn Ridge Road was now under extended observation and subject to compliance modifications within 30 days. They weren't asking permission. They were telling me they were going to annex my driveway because they didn't like how it looked from their manicured living rooms. I took a photo of the letter and sent it to Sarah Vance, the nastiest, sharpest real estate attorney in the state, a woman who eats HOAs for breakfast and picks her teeth with the bylaws. She called me 3 minutes later, laughing a dark, dangerous laugh. Elias, are they high? They can't just claim a private road because they feel like it. I'm drafting a cease and desist that's going to blister their skin when they touch the paper. Sarah sent the nuclear option, a letter copying the county, the state, and every board member individually. Warned them that if they stepped foot on my land again, we'd sue them into the Stone Age. For 48 hours, silence fell over the ranch. Buster went back to sleeping in the sun, and I thought, maybe, just maybe, I'd scared them off. But I underestimated the insanity of Linda Sterling. 2 days later, another letter appeared, wedged into the gate. But this one was different. It was angry, desperate, claiming that my refusal to allow an inspection was obstruction of community governance and threatening to escalate the matter to county authorities. I laughed out loud standing there in the dust, because the sheer delusion required to threaten me with the county, when I was already working with the county, was staggering. I was about to go inside when something caught the sun on the other side of the fence line, down on the HOA property, and I walked over to investigate. There, pointing directly at my front door, was a brand new, black tripod surveillance camera, staring unblinkingly at my private life. They weren't just trespassing anymore. They were hunting. I walked right up to the fence, leaned over until my face filled their lens, and gave them a slow, crisp salute with one finger. This wasn't a dispute anymore. It was war. And if they wanted to play games with surveillance and fake authority, I was about to show them what a professional looks like. There is a fatal flaw in the psychology of people who pretend to have power, and that flaw is vanity. They cannot resist the allure of a clipboard and a high-visibility vest, so I decided to feed that hunger. I went into my workshop and printed out a sign, a beautiful, official-looking fabrication that read Joint Engineering Survey, County and Private Initiative, Authorized Personnel Only, and I planted it right inside my gate along with a couple of orange cones and an old, empty toolbox that looked important if you didn't think about it too hard. It was bait, pure and simple, a shiny object designed to lure a raccoon into a cage. I didn't have to wait long, because that very night, my phone alerted me that the rats were taking the cheese. The white Land Rover was back, idling at the bottom of the hill, and out stepped Meathead and the scribe, drawn to my fake construction site like moths to a bug zapper. I watched on the monitor, sipping a whiskey, as the scribe scanned the QR code I'd put on the sign, a code that linked directly to the county website showing my undeniable ownership of the land. And I saw the color drain from his face in the eerie green glow of the night vision. He realized, in that moment, that they were standing in a legal bear trap, and they scrambled back to their SUV and peeled out, leaving a cloud of dust and fear behind them. But Linda Sterling wasn't the type to let facts get in the way of her crusade, and the escalation that followed was so bizarre, so criminally stupid, that even I was surprised. 2 days later, I was fixing a fence line when a gray, nondescript sedan pulled up to the gate. Not the patrol SUV, but a generic car that smelled like a rental. A man stepped out wearing a windbreaker with County Infrastructure Inspector ironed onto the back, but the lettering was crooked, peeling at the corners, looking like it had been applied with a hair straightener at 3 in the morning. He started measuring my driveway, trying to look official, but he moved all wrong. Too stiff, checking his shoulder constantly. I stepped out from the tree lean and let out a sharp whistle that made him jump nearly out of his skin. "Can I help you?" I asked, keeping my voice low and flat. He straightened up, puffing out his chest. "Yes, sir. Marcus Hale, County Infrastructure. We've had reports of code violations." I stared at him. "Let me see some ID, Marcus." He fumbled, producing a laminated card that looked like it was printed on a home inkjet. No hologram, no seal. I pulled out my phone and dialed Sheriff Brody on speaker. "Sheriff," I said, locking eyes with the fake inspector. "You got a Marcus Hale on the payroll? Guy says he's inspecting my road." Brody's voice crackled through the air, sharp and loud. "We don't have a Marcus, and we don't have any inspectors out today. Elias, hold him there." The color vanished from the man's face. He didn't argue. He didn't bluff. He bolted. He sprinted back to his gray sedan, tripping over his own feet, dove into the driver's seat, and reversed so hard he nearly put the car in the ditch before screeching away. But in his panic, he dropped something. I walked over to the gravel and picked up a small, black notebook. It wasn't official county documentation. It was a diary of madness. Inside, written in aggressive, heavy pen strokes, were notes. "Lindo wants control by Friday. Get gate code from Gardner." And a terrifying checklist that ended with established checkpoint, force compliance. I called Sarah Vance immediately. "Sarah, we've got them. We traced the plate of the sedan. It belongs to Robert Sterling, Linda's husband. He was impersonating a government official." "That's a felony, Elias," Sarah said, her voice trembling with a mix of excitement and disbelief. "They aren't just annoying neighbors anymore. They are operating a criminal conspiracy. But listen to me. If they're talking about a checkpoint in that notebook, they're going to try something physical. Be ready." She was right. The final escalation came the next morning, and it involved an innocent bystander. I got a call from Otis, my hay supplier, sounding more rattled than I'd ever heard him. "Elias, I can't get up the hill. They've blocked the road." I grabbed my body cam, clipped it to my chest, and drove down to the entrance of Thorn Ridge Road. The sight that greeted me was infuriating. The HOA patrol goons had set up a makeshift roadblock with cones and were physically standing in front of Otis's massive truck, holding their hands up like traffic cops. I slammed my truck into park and stormed over. "Get the hell out of the way," I warned. One of the guys, a kid wearing mirrored aviators, stepped forward. "Sir, this is an active safety zone. We cannot allow heavy vehicles until the gradient is approved." "Approved by who?" I snapped, getting right in his face. "This is private land. You are unlawfully detaining a commercial vehicle and trespassing. We answer to the board," the kid stammered, his confidence wobbling as he noticed the camera on my chest. I turned to Otis. "Drive through. If they don't move, that's on them." Otis revved the engine, the massive diesel roar echoing off the canyon walls. The safety patrol scrambled out of the way like startled rabbits, tripping over their own cones. I stood there, filming their retreat, and shouted, "Next time, you leave in handcuffs." I uploaded the footage to a private server and sent the link to Brody and Sarah. The response was immediate. The HOA wasn't stopping, they were doubling down. That night, hiding near the ridge, I picked up radio chatter on a frequency Brody told me to monitor. It was Linda Sterling. Her voice cut through the static, shrill and commanding. "I don't care about the hay truck. Tomorrow, we bring the tent. We bring the barricades. We set up the permanent checkpoint. If Elias tries to stop us, we claim he assaulted us. I want that road under our control by noon." My stomach tightened. They were planning a hostile takeover, a physical seizure of my land using a fake checkpoint as the anchor. I called Sheriff Brody one last time. "Brody, bring the prosecutor," I said, my voice shaking with adrenaline. "Bring everyone. She's actually doing it. She's building a border crossing on my driveway." "Stay calm, Elias," Brody replied, his tone deadly serious. "Do not engage until we get there. Let her dig the grave." The morning of the final showdown felt heavy, the air thick with the kind of electricity you feel before a lightning strike. I watched from the top of the hill as the circus arrived. It wasn't just a patrol car this time. It was a convoy. A flatbed truck unloaded a white canopy tent, heavy plastic barricades, and official-looking stop signs. They were building a fortress at the bottom of my driveway. I waited until they were fully set up, until Linda Sterling herself arrived in her silver Mercedes, stepping out like a conquering queen inspecting her new colony. She was wearing a blazer and sunglasses, pointing fingers, directing her little army of volunteers and security guards. It was truly a sight to behold, a delusional coup d'etat playing out on a dirt road in Colorado. I checked my body cam battery, patted Buster on the head, and began the long walk down the hill. As I approached, the scene was almost impressive in its insanity. They had created a single lane with the barricades, manned by Meathead and the scribe. Linda stood in the center, arms crossed. "Halt!" one of the guards shouted. "State your business." I didn't stop. I walked right up to the barricade. "My business is that I live here, you idiot. This is my driveway." Linda stepped forward, a smirk plastered on her face. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "As you refuse to comply with our safety assessments, the association has assumed emergency jurisdiction over this access point. You'll need a resident pass to enter or exit." She held out a laminated card. I looked at it, looked at her, and said, "You are out of your mind, Linda. You are currently committing felony trespass, unlawful restraint, and impersonation of law enforcement." "We are the enforcement," she snapped, her mask slipping. "This community is bigger than your ego. We have the right to regulate our perimeter." "Is that so?" I asked, looking past her. "Tell it to them." At that moment, the cavalry arrived. And it wasn't quiet. 2 sheriff's cruisers, an unmarked detective unit, and, the cherry on top, the Channel 4 news van that Sarah had tipped off, came roaring up the public road. The sirens chirped, cutting through Linda's monologue like a knife. The look on Linda Sterling's face was worth every second of stress I'd endured. It wasn't fear, it was confusion. She genuinely couldn't process that the flashing lights were for her. Sheriff Brody stepped out, adjusting his belt, followed by the county prosecutor, a man named Mr. Henderson who looked like he hadn't smiled since 1998. "Officers," Linda waved, walking toward them. "Thank God you're here. This man is disrupting a community safety operation. I need him removed." Brody ignored her hand. "Ma'am, step away from the barricade." "Excuse me." Linda blinked. Mr. Henderson stepped forward, opening a folder. "Linda Sterling? You are operating an illegal checkpoint on private property. We have evidence of conspiracy, fraud, and harassment." "I am the HOA president," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "I have authority. Even judges live in HOAs. You work for us." The silence that followed was deafening. Even her own security guards took a step back, dropping their clipboards. "Are you suggesting," Mr. Henderson said, his voice terrifyingly calm, "that the judicial system is subservient to your homeowners association?" I just meant." Linda stammered, realizing she had just talked herself into a corner she couldn't laminate her way out of. "Linda Sterling, you are under arrest," Brody said, spinning her around. As the cuffs clicked shut, she started screaming. Not words, just a primal, frustrated sound of a worldview shattering. Her husband, Robert, tried to slink away toward his car, but a deputy intercepted him. "You too, Mr. Inspector." The news cameras caught it all, the tent being torn down, the barricades loaded into evidence trucks, and the Queen of Whispering Pines being guided into the back of a cruiser, looking small and defeated. The court date was a massacre. Sarah Vance presented the video, the audio, the fake inspector's notebook, and the emails Linda had sent instructing her team to seize the road. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with zero patience for suburban warlords, barely let Linda's lawyer speak. The verdict was brutal. 2 years of probation, massive fines for the HOA that nearly bankrupted their reserve fund, a permanent restraining order, and Linda was banned for life from holding any position in any community organization. Walking out of the courthouse, the air felt lighter. I drove back to Thorn Ridge, drove up my road without passing a single cone, and sat on my porch with Buster. It was quiet. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the valley. I put up a new sign the next week. It was simple, steel, and bolted into concrete. Private property. No trespassing. No exceptions. It's been 6 months, and I haven't seen a single white SUV. But sometimes, when I sit out here looking at the stars, I wonder about the nature of people like Linda. Did she really believe she was the hero? Do we all think we're the good guys, even when we're trampling over someone else's life? Justice was served, sure, and the bad guys lost, but it makes you ask, Where does the desire to control your neighbor come from? Is it fear? Or is it just the darkest part of human nature, waiting for a little bit of authority to let it loose? All I know is, my gate is locked, my shotgun is back in the safe, and my land finally feels like mine again.